Ma'am, I just need you to scan my boarding pass.
Don't touch my counter, you hear me? Get your dirty hands off my counter.
I'm sorry, I was just...
You were just what I can smell a scam. The second one of you people walks up to my gate, you think I'm stupid, huh?
Ma'am, these are my real documents. Please just look.
I wouldn't touch those with gloves on.
Holly Whitaker grabbed every document off the counter, held them between two fingers like they were covered in filth, and dropped them into the trash.
Get your black
Now get your black ass out of my line before I have you arrested. 40 passengers. Dead silence. Nobody moved. The girl reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed one number. That single call cost this airport its license. Let me take you back to the beginning. 6:30 in the morning, Washington, D.C. A brownstone on a tree-lined street where the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and coffee brewing through an open kitchen window. Danielle Tucker, Danny to everyone who knew her, was standing in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of a navy blazer she had ironed the night before. 17 years old, braids pulled back tight, a small gold stud in each ear that her grandmother gave her on her 16th birthday. On the wall behind her, 3 things told you everything you needed to know about this girl. A Howard University acceptance letter, pinned with a red thumbtack. A debate team trophy from the National Forensics League. And a framed photograph of a man in Air Force dress blues. Her father, Staff Sergeant William Tucker, who died serving his country when Danny was 9 years old. She zipped her carry-on and checked her travel folder one more time. Boarding pass, printed itinerary, school ID, debit card, medical card for a peanut allergy she had managed since she was 5, and tucked at the bottom, a letter from Georgia Tech confirming her interview slot for the Robinson Clark STEM Scholarship. $100,000 toward an aerospace engineering degree. This was the interview she had been preparing for since 7th grade. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like buttered toast and Earl Grey tea. Her grandmother, Eleanor Tucker, stood at the counter with the posture of a woman who had spent 31 years behind a federal bench. 68 years old, silver hair cropped short, glasses on a chain around her neck. Retired now, but the courtroom never really left her. Eleanor had been a United States federal judge. Before that, a member of the Civil Rights Commission. She had written opinions that changed hiring law in 3 states. She had stared down governors, and every single morning she made her granddaughter toast with the crusts cut off. Because some things don't need to be tough. "You have everything?" Eleanor asked without looking up. "Triple-checked, Grandma." "Good. Come here." Danny walked over. Eleanor kissed her forehead, then slipped a small leather wallet into her hand. Brown. Worn. No bigger than a playing card. "What's this?" "Insurance," Eleanor said, "in case anyone forgets who you are. Don't open it unless they make you." Danny rolled her eyes the way only a 17-year-old can. She had heard this line 100 times. She dropped the wallet into her blazer pocket without looking inside. "I'll be fine, Grandma." "I know you will. You carry yourself like you belong everywhere. Because you do." The Uber arrived at 6:50. Danny climbed in, put her earbuds in, and started rehearsing interview answers under her breath. She whispered about thermodynamics and propulsion systems, while the driver hummed along to gospel radio and the morning sun turned the Potomac gold. Her route was simple. Fly from D.C. to Charlotte. Connect through Charlotte to Atlanta. Land by noon. Interview at 2. She had built in extra time for every possible delay. Every delay except one. Charlotte Douglas International Airport hit her like a wall of noise the moment she stepped inside. Friday afternoon, peak summer travel. The terminal was a river of rolling suitcases, crying toddlers, and the sweet, heavy smell of Cinnabon mixing with jet fuel from the tarmac vents. Danny moved through the crowd with the quiet confidence of someone who had flown alone before. She cleared security in under 8 minutes. The TSA officer at the checkpoint, a broad-shouldered man named Caleb Brennan with kind eyes and a crew cut, glanced at her ID, glanced at her face, and nodded. "You're all set, young lady. Have a safe flight." "Thank you, sir." "Heading somewhere exciting?" "Scholarship interview. Georgia Tech." Officer Brennan smiled. "Go get that money. Good luck." A small kindness from a stranger. Remember that moment. It matters later. Danny walked to gate B22 with 20 minutes to spare. She found a seat by the window, pulled out her economics textbook, and started reading. Outside, a Crestline Airways jet was being loaded on the tarmac. The sun caught the wing and threw a blade of light across the terminal floor. Everything was on schedule. Everything was calm. And then Holly Whitaker's voice crackled over the gate intercom. "Boarding call. Group 1. Danny closed her book, straightened her blazer, and walked to the counter. She had no idea what was waiting for her. The line at gate B22 moved the way airport lines always do. Slow, shuffling, impatient. Businessmen checking their watches. A mother balancing a toddler on one hip and a diaper bag on the other. An elderly couple holding hands, boarding passes tucked into the husband's shirt pocket. Danny waited in group 2. When her turn came, she stepped forward, laid her boarding pass and ID on the counter, and said the same thing every passenger says. "Here you go, ma'am." Holly Whitaker didn't reach for the documents right away. She looked at Danny first, looked at her braids, looked at her blazer, looked at her skin. Then she picked up the ID the way someone picks up a piece of trash they found on their shoe. She held it up to the fluorescent light overhead, tilted it left, tilted it right, squinted at the photo like she was examining a counterfeit bill. "This doesn't look like you." Danny kept her voice even. "It was taken last year, ma'am. Same hairstyle, same face." Holly flipped the ID over, ran her thumbnail across the back like she was checking for a seam. Then she set it down on the counter, not back toward Danny, but on her own side, claiming it. "Step aside. I need to verify this." "Verify what, exactly?" "Step aside." The line behind Danny went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people minding their own business. The uncomfortable quiet of people watching something go wrong and not knowing whose side to take yet. Danny stepped aside. She stood near the window where the afternoon sun was streaming through the glass. She could feel the heat on the back of her neck. She could hear the low hum of the jet bridge connected to the plane. Her plane. The one she was supposed to be boarding right now. Holly picked up her desk phone. She didn't dial a number. She pressed one button, intercom, and said, "Greg, I need you at B22. Greg Sutton appeared from the back office 45 seconds later. Mid-50s, thinning blonde hair, a Crestline Airways lanyard bouncing against his belly. He had the look of a man who had been doing this job long enough to stop caring about doing it well. Holly handed him Danny's ID without explanation. Greg glanced at it, glanced at Danny, glanced back at Holly. "What's the issue?" "She doesn't match the photo, and the documents look off." Greg held the ID for maybe 3 seconds. He didn't tilt it, didn't examine it, didn't compare it to the girl standing 6 feet away with the exact same face. He handed it back to Holly and shrugged. Use your judgment. 3 words. That's all it took. Use your judgment. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He gave Holly permission to do whatever she wanted by pretending he wasn't involved. Then he turned around and walked back into the office. That shrug would cost him his career. But he didn't know that yet. Holly's posture changed the second Greg disappeared. She stood taller, chin up, shoulders back. She had authorization now, or at least she believed she did. And belief is all a bully needs. She turned to Danny. I'm going to need a secondary form of identification. Danny didn't argue. She reached into her travel folder and handed over her school ID. Theodore Roosevelt High School. Junior class. Photo taken in September. Same braids, same face. Holly barely looked at it. I need a third form. A third? You heard me. Danny pulled out her debit card. Her own name was printed on the front. Danielle R. Tucker. Holly set all 3 documents in a row on her side of the counter. Boarding pass, school ID, debit card. She stared at them like they were pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. None of these prove you're old enough to fly alone. Danny's jaw tightened. Just barely. Just enough that if you were standing close, you might have caught it. But her voice stayed level. I'm 17 years old, ma'am. The minimum age for unaccompanied travel on Crestline Airways is 15. It's on your own company's website. Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the passenger policy. I read it before I booked. Holly's left eye twitched. That's the thing about people who abuse small power. They don't expect resistance. They especially don't expect a teenager to quote their own rule book back at them. It breaks the script in their head, and when the script breaks, they get meaner. Behind Danny, a young woman named Aubrey Carlisle was standing 3 spots back in line. 26 years old, graphic designer from Raleigh. She had been watching the whole thing with her jaw slowly dropping open. Now she reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and tilted the screen toward the counter. She pressed record. She whispered to the man standing next to her, "Are you seeing this?" He nodded. "I've been watching for 2 minutes. This is insane." Aubrey kept the phone steady. The red dot blinked in the corner of the screen. At the counter, Holly was getting louder. Not yelling, not yet. But her voice had that sharp, brittle edge that comes right before someone says something they can't take back. "Where did you get this itinerary?" "From the airline, when I booked my ticket." "This looks printed from a home computer." It was. From the confirmation email your airline sent me. "And this interview letter? Georgia Tech? Really?" Holly let out a short laugh through her nose. "You're telling me Georgia Tech is interviewing a girl who can't even produce a valid ID?" "My ID is valid, ma'am. You're holding it." "This ID is suspicious. This whole setup is suspicious. I think someone put you up to this. I think someone bought this ticket with a stolen card and printed these documents to get you on this plane." Danny's hands were at her sides, still, flat, her fingernails pressed into her palms, the only sign of what was happening inside her. "That is not what happened." "Then explain to me why a girl your age is flying alone with documents that look like they were made in a copy shop." "Because I am a student traveling to a scholarship interview, ma'am. Everything I've shown you is real. Everything I've told you is true. I'm asking you, please, just scan my boarding pass." Holly leaned forward, close enough that Danny could smell the peppermint gum on her breath and the chemical tang of the hand sanitizer on the counter. "I don't believe you." She said it slowly, 3 words, each one a door slamming shut. Then Holly gathered the documents, the itinerary, the school ID, the debit card, the Georgia Tech confirmation letter, and she picked up something else from Danny's travel folder. A folded piece of cream-colored paper, heavier than the rest. Old. Handled many times. It was the program from Staff Sergeant William Tucker's military funeral. Danny had carried it in every bag she'd packed since she was 9 years old. Holly didn't know what it was. She didn't care. She stacked it on top of the other papers, turned around, and dropped the entire pile into the trash can behind the counter. The lid swung shut with a plastic clap that echoed across the gate. There, problem solved. You're not flying today, sweetheart. She smiled. Actually smiled. Go call whoever made those for you and tell them to try harder next time. The gate area was silent. Not a whisper, not a cough. Even the toddler in his mother's arms had stopped fussing, as if the air itself had changed pressure. Aubrey Carlisle's phone was still recording. Her hand was shaking, but the camera was steady. And Danielle Tucker, 17 years old, 5'6", 120 pounds, standing alone in a blazer she had ironed the night before, did not cry, did not raise her voice, did not move. She looked at Holly Whitaker with an expression that was not anger, not sadness. It was something quieter than both, something that a woman who had been raised by a federal judge and an Air Force officer learns to carry instead of a weapon. She said, very clearly, I would like the names of every supervisor on duty at this gate. I would also like this interaction recorded in Crestline's official complaint system. My phone has been on since this conversation started. Thank you. Holly laughed. A real, full laugh. Head tipped back. Call whoever you want, sweetheart. Call the president. You're still not getting on this plane. Holly wasn't done. She had won. Or at least, she thought she had. The documents were in the trash. The girl was off the boarding list. The line was moving again. But that wasn't enough. It's never enough for people like Holly Whitaker. Winning isn't the point. The point is making sure the other person knows they lost. She picked up the phone at her counter and dialed a 3-digit number. Airport security. Not TSA. Not federal officers with training and oversight and body cameras. She called the airport's private, contracted security team. The ones who answered to the terminal, not to the law. Yeah, this is Holly at B-22. I've got a young female here, black, 17 or so, traveling alone with fraudulent documents. I need a bag check, and I need her moved. She said it loud enough for Danny to hear, loud enough for everyone to hear. She wanted it that way. 2 security guards arrived in under 3 minutes. Both men, both big, black tactical vests, radios crackling on their shoulders with that harsh electronic static that makes your chest tight even when you've done nothing wrong. The taller one looked at Danny. Ma'am, we've been asked to inspect your carry-on. On what grounds? We've received a report of potentially fraudulent travel documents. Danny looked at him. Then she looked at Holly, who was leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, watching, enjoying. My documents are in the trash can behind that woman, Danny said quietly. She put them there herself. The guard hesitated, just for a second. A flicker of something, doubt maybe, or discomfort crossed his face. But it passed. He had his orders. Orders are easier than thinking. We still need to inspect the bag, ma'am. Please set it on the floor and step back. Danny set her carry-on on the floor of gate B-22. The tile was cold and scuffed. A coffee stain shaped like a crescent moon sat 3 inches from the zipper. They opened it right there, in the middle of the gate, in front of every single passenger waiting to board. The taller guard pulled out her clothes first. A folded white blouse for the interview, a pair of pressed black slacks, underwear. He held each item up, turned it over, and set it on the dirty airport floor. A woman in the 3rd row of seats covered her mouth with her hand. Then the textbook, Advanced Microeconomics, 3rd edition, dog-eared on Chapter 11. He fanned the pages like he was looking for something hidden between them. Then the toiletries, a travel toothbrush, a small bottle of cocoa butter lotion that Danny's grandmother had packed for her because the airplane air dries out your skin. The guard unscrewed the cap and sniffed it. Then the medication, a box of epinephrine auto-injectors for her peanut allergy, prescription label, her name printed clearly on the side. The guard turned the box around in his hands like he'd never seen one before. And then, at the very bottom of the bag, a folder. Inside that folder, a single sheet of cream-colored paper. The funeral program. The one Holly had already thrown in the trash once, but this was a second copy. Danny always carried 2, one in the travel folder, one in the bag. Because some things you don't risk losing. The guard pulled it out and unfolded it. On the front, a photograph of Staff Sergeant William Tucker in his dress blues, an American flag. The words, "A life of service, a legacy of love." He looked at it. He looked at Danny. And then Holly Whitaker walked over. She was supposed to stay at the counter. She had no authority over a security inspection. But she walked over anyway, heels clicking on the tile, and looked down at the funeral program in the guard's hand. "Oh, that's cute. So now we're carrying props, too?" Danny said nothing. Holly turned to the guard. "She matches the description we have for credit card fraud. Young, black female, traveling alone, documents that don't check out. I'd hold her until the police arrive if I were you." There was no description. There was no fraud alert. There was no flag in any system anywhere in that airport with Danielle Tucker's name on it. Holly Whitaker made it up, right there, on the spot. And she said it with the same confidence she used to announce boarding groups. The guard looked at his partner. His partner shrugged. The same kind of shrug Greg Sutton had given 30 minutes ago. The shrug that says, "I don't want to be involved, so do whatever you want. We're going to need you to wait in the holding area, ma'am." They walked Danny to a row of chairs cordoned off with a retractable belt barrier near the back wall of the gate. The kind of area they use for passengers who've been flagged. Separated. Visible to everyone, but treated like no one. Danny sat down. She placed her hands in her lap. Her carry-on, still unzipped, clothes still on the floor, sat 6 feet away. Nobody offered to repack it. From her seat, Danny could see the jet bridge. She could see passengers scanning their passes and walking down the tunnel to the plane. Her plane. Her seat. Her scholarship interview waiting at the other end. She watched a man in the golf shirt board without being asked for a single document. She watched a woman board with an expired-looking passport and a cheerful wave from Holly. She watched a teenager, white, blonde, roughly her age, bored with nothing but a phone screen and a smile. None of them were stopped. None of them were searched. None of them were asked for a second ID, a third ID, an explanation for their existence. Then Holly walked over to the cordoned area. She leaned down, close. Close enough that Danny could see the mascara clumped on her lower lashes and the faint coffee stain on her Crestline lanyard. "You know what the smart move is, sweetheart? Just leave. Walk away. Save yourself the embarrassment. I've seen your type try this before. It never works. We always catch you. Danny looked up. Her eyes were steady. My type? Holly smiled. The kind of smile that isn't a smile at all. You know exactly what I mean. Say it. Holly straightened up. She didn't say it. She didn't need to. Every person within earshot already understood. At the counter, the boarding door was closing. The gate agent for the next shift was logging in. The jet bridge pulled back with a mechanical groan, and through the window, Danny watched Crestline Flight 1208 push back from the gate. The engine whine rose. The navigation lights blinked red and white against the afternoon sky. The plane turned, taxied, and disappeared down the runway. Gone. Her connection, her interview, her $100,000 scholarship. Gone. For the first time, Danny's composure cracked. Not a lot. Not a breakdown. Just one long, slow breath through her nose. The kind of breath you take when you're holding something inside your chest that wants to come out as a scream, but you refuse. You absolutely refuse to give them that satisfaction. She reached into her blazer pocket, past her phone, past her earbuds. Her fingers found the small leather wallet her grandmother had pressed into her hand that morning. The one she'd never opened. The one Eleanor called insurance. She opened it. Inside, a single business card. Heavy cardstock, navy blue lettering. The seal of the Federal Aviation Administration embossed in the upper left corner. Margaret Holloway, Regional Administrator, FAA Southeast Region. And below the title, handwritten in blue ink, a personal cell phone number. Danny stared at it for 3 seconds. Then she pulled out her phone, walked to a quiet corner near the window where the sun was cutting a bright rectangle across the floor, and dialed. 1 ring. 2 rings. Danny? Sweetheart, aren't you supposed to be in the air right now? Aunt Margaret, I'm at Charlotte Douglas, gate B22. Something just happened that I think you're going to want to handle. Silence on the other end. Not confusion. Recognition. The silence of someone who has spent 20 years in federal aviation enforcement and knows exactly what that sentence means when a black girl says it from an airport gate. Tell me everything. Slowly. Danny told her. All of it. The ID inspection, the 3 forms of identification, the documents in the trash, the fake fraud accusation, the bag search, the funeral program, the holding area, the plane leaving without her. Margaret Holloway listened without interrupting. When Danny finished, there was another silence. Longer this time. Danny could hear her aunt breathing. Measured. Controlled. The kind of breathing that comes right before a decision that ruins someone's career. Stay exactly where you are, baby. Do not say another word to that woman. Do not leave that gate. I am making calls right now. She hung up. Holly Whitaker, still laughing at the counter, still telling Greg Sutton about the scammer girl she'd just handled, had no idea that the most powerful aviation official in the southeastern United States had just been activated by one phone call from the girl she'd thrown in the trash. Let me tell you who Margaret Holloway is, because Holly Whitaker had no idea. And that's what makes this beautiful. Margaret Holloway is the Federal Aviation Administration's regional administrator for the entire southeast region of the United States. That means every commercial airport from Virginia to Florida, from Tennessee to the Carolina coast, every gate, every runway, every badge, every operating license, answers to her office. She has the legal authority to ground flights, to suspend certifications, to shut down an entire airport with a single signature. She earned that title after 22 years of climbing through the most male-dominated corridors of federal aviation. She started as a field inspector in Alabama, crawling under fuselages with a flashlight and a clipboard. She ended up in a corner office in Atlanta with a view of Hartsfield-Jackson and a direct line to the Secretary of Transportation. And Danielle Tucker's father, Staff Sergeant William Tucker, the man in the framed photograph, the man whose funeral program was sitting in an airport trash can right now, was Margaret's younger brother, her baby brother, the one she helped raise after their mother worked double shifts at a textile mill in Greensboro, the one she drove to his Air Force swearing-in ceremony, the one she buried on a Tuesday in April with full military honors while holding his 9-year-old daughter's hand. That is who Holly Whitaker just crossed. Not just a federal administrator, a woman who made a promise at her brother's grave to protect his child. And that promise had just been broken by a gate agent with a power trip and a trash can. Now let me tell you about Eleanor Tucker, because she matters too. Danny's grandmother wasn't just a retired federal judge. She was the Honorable Eleanor Tucker, 31 years on the bench, former member of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, author of 14 published opinions on employment discrimination that are still cited in law schools today. The leather wallet she gave Danny that morning didn't just contain Margaret's business card. It also held a second card, the direct line to the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights. Eleanor had prepared for this moment. Not this specific moment, but this kind of moment. Because she knew, the way every black grandmother in America knows, that her grandchild would one day stand in front of someone who saw nothing but skin color. And when that day came, Eleanor made sure Danny would not be alone. 3 generations, a federal judge, an FAA administrator, and a 17-year-old girl who had the composure to use them both at exactly the right time. Margaret Holloway made 4 phone calls in 6 minutes. Call 1, Walter Ashby, CEO of Meridian Airport Authority, the company that operates Charlotte Douglas. She did not introduce herself with pleasantries. She said, "Walter, you have a civil rights emergency at Gate B22. I am formally notifying you that my office has received a complaint. You have 15 minutes to get to that gate personally." Call 2, the FAA Southeast Field Office in Charlotte. 2 inspectors who were already in the terminal conducting a routine audit were redirected to Gate B22 immediately. They were told to document everything: names, badge numbers, timestamps. Call 3, Crestline Airways Regional Vice President, a man named Douglas Perry, whose office was 5 miles from the airport. Margaret said 8 words. "Get to Charlotte Douglas now. Bring your lawyer." Call 4, Eleanor Tucker. Margaret's voice was steady, but underneath it was something sharp and old and furious. "Mom," she said, because Eleanor had raised her too, "they threw William's funeral program in the trash." Silence on the line. Then Eleanor Tucker, 68 years old, retired federal judge, said one sentence: "End them." 12 minutes after Danny's phone call, the first wave arrived. 2 FAA field inspectors walked through the terminal with clipboards and federal badges. Behind them, Walter Ashby, sweating through his dress shirt, tie loosened, face the color of wet cement, half-jogged to keep up. Behind him, Douglas Perry, Crestline's regional VP, briefcase in one hand, phone pressed to his ear with the other, already calling corporate legal. Holly Whitaker was leaning on the counter at B22, scrolling through her phone. Greg Sutton was in the back office eating a sandwich. Neither of them looked up. Then a voice cut through the gate area, clear, calm. The kind of calm that doesn't need volume because it carries authority in every syllable. Which one of you is the agent who handled the passenger at this gate 30 minutes ago? Holly looked up. A tall woman in a charcoal suit stood in front of her counter. Navy blouse, an FAA badge clipped to her lapel. Behind her, 2 inspectors, the airport CEO, and the airline VP. 4 people who outranked Holly in ways she couldn't even count. Holly straightened up, tried the smile. That would be me. Is there a— Walk over to that trash can, Margaret Holloway said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And retrieve every single document you placed inside it. Right now. Holly blinked. I'm sorry. Who? My name is Margaret Holloway. I am the Regional Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, Southeast Region. I have the authority to revoke this airport's operating certificate before you finish your next sentence. She paused. Let the words land. And I am also her aunt. She pointed at Danny, sitting in the cordoned area, blazer still straight, hands still in her lap. Holly Whitaker's face went white. Not pink, not pale, white. The blood left her cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. The smirk was gone. The confidence was gone. The voice that had said, "Girls like you," and "your type," and "get your black ass out of my line," was gone. All that was left was a woman in a Crestline lanyard who had just realized, too late, that the girl she tried to destroy had the power to destroy her instead. The next 4 minutes were the longest of Holly Whitaker's life. Margaret didn't move, didn't blink. She stood at that counter like a woman who had given orders to rooms far more powerful than this one, and waited for them to be followed. "The trash can," Margaret repeated. "Now." Holly's hands were shaking. Not a little tremble, a full, visible shake that ran from her fingertips to her elbows. She turned around slowly and reached into the trash bin behind the counter. She pulled out Danny's boarding pass first, crumpled, damp from a half-empty coffee cup. Then the school ID, smeared with something brown. Then the debit card with sticky residue on the back. Then the Georgia Tech confirmation, torn at the corner. And then the funeral program. Staff Sergeant William Tucker's face stared up from the cream-colored paper, stained with coffee grounds. A dark ring sat across the American flag on the cover. The words, "A life of service, a legacy of love," were smudged, but still readable. Holly held the stack out toward Danny. Margaret intercepted. She took the documents with both hands, carefully, the way you handle something that matters. She looked at the funeral program for a long moment. Her jaw tightened. But she did not cry. Not here. Not in front of this woman. These are now federal evidence, every item, photographed and logged. An FAA inspector stepped forward with a clear plastic evidence bag and a digital camera. The shutter clicked 6 times. Each click sounded like a nail in a coffin. Holly tried to speak. I was following security protocols. There was a flag in the—" "There was no flag." Margaret's voice was flat. No anger, just a fact. "We already checked. No fraud alert, no security flag, no report of any kind. You fabricated a criminal accusation against a 17-year-old minor. That is a violation of Title 49 of the United States Code, a federal offense, witnessed by 40 passengers, at least one of whom has been recording since the beginning. She gestured toward Aubrey Carlisle, phone still raised, red dot still blinking. Holly's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Greg Sutton chose this moment to slip from the back office toward the corridor. A hand landed on his shoulder. The second FAA inspector. Mr. Sutton, you authorized this interaction. Is that correct?
I told her to use her judgment. I didn't tell her to.
You authorized it and left without oversight. Remain here. You're included in this review. Douglas Perry, Crestline's regional VP, stepped forward next, face slick with sweat, tie crooked. He had driven 5 miles in 8 minutes and looked like every one of those minutes had aged him a year. He turned to Holly. Ms. Whitaker, effective immediately, you are relieved of duty pending a full federal investigation. Surrender your airport access badge. Holly's fingers fumbled with the clip on her lanyard. She couldn't get it off. Her hands were shaking too badly. Perry reached over, unclipped it himself, and handed it to the FAA inspector. The inspector pulled out a pair of scissors and cut it in half. One clean snip. 2 pieces of plastic fell onto the counter. That snap made Holly flinch like she'd been slapped. Airport police will escort you from the secure area, Perry said. Do not return to any Crestline property until notified by legal. 2 officers appeared behind Holly. She turned to them, mouth trembling. She looked at Danny one last time. Danny looked back, calm, still, unmoved. Holly Whitaker was walked out of Gate B-22 the same way she had tried to walk Danny out. Except Holly wasn't heading to an interview. She wasn't heading anywhere. Greg Sutton surrendered his badge without a word. Administrative leave, effective immediately. A formal summons from the FAA's Office of Civil Rights would follow. He nodded, like a man who had always known this day was coming and had finally run out of shrugs. Within 40 minutes, Crestline chartered a private flight to get Danny to Atlanta. The CEO of the airline personally called Eleanor Tucker to apologize. Eleanor listened, then replied in her courtroom voice, "My granddaughter does not need an apology from a man who hires people who throw children's documents in the trash. She needs to not be the last one this happens to." Danny arrived at Georgia Tech with 8 minutes to spare. She walked in, sat down, nailed it. She would later say it was the calmest interview of her life. After what she had just survived, talking about thermodynamics felt like a vacation. Aubrey Carlisle posted the video at 9:14 that evening. She didn't add filters, didn't add music, didn't add commentary. She just uploaded the raw footage. 7 minutes and 32 seconds of Holly Whitaker dismantling a 17-year-old girl's dignity at Gate B-22, with a single caption. This happened today. Watch the whole thing. By midnight, it had 400,000 views. By sunrise, 2 million. By the time the weekend was over, 12 million people had watched Holly Whitaker throw a dead soldier's funeral program into the trash and tell a black teenager to get her black ass out of her line. The comments section was a wildfire. "I'm shaking, actually shaking. That girl's composure is unreal. I would have lost it." So the gate agent just made up a fraud charge? On camera?
while being filmed?
Tell me she got fired. Tell me. Bridget Sullivan, anchor for a national cable news network, led the Monday evening broadcast with the story. She opened with the still frame that would become the defining image of the entire case. Danny standing alone in the cordoned area, blazer still straight, hands in her lap, while Holly laughed at the counter 6 feet away. A 17-year-old honor student. A dead soldier's daughter. A federal aviation administrator's niece. And a gate agent who had absolutely no idea who she was talking to. Tonight, what this incident reveals about who gets believed in American airports and who doesn't. The segment ran 11 minutes. It included Aubrey's footage, a statement from Crestline Airways, and an interview with a civil rights attorney who called the incident one of the most clearly documented cases of racial profiling in commercial aviation in the last decade. By Tuesday morning, 3 Congress members had issued public statements. By Wednesday, the FAA announced a formal investigation. Margaret Holloway recused herself within 24 hours. She had to. Danny was her niece. Any involvement in the investigation would create a conflict of interest that could compromise the case. She stepped aside publicly, issued a 1-paragraph statement. I have full confidence in the Office of Civil Rights to conduct a thorough and impartial review. And then she went silent. She didn't need to say anything else. The evidence was already screaming. The investigation moved fast. The FAA's Office of Civil Rights, joined by the Department of Transportation, subpoenaed Crestline's internal records for Gate B-22 going back 6 years. They subpoenaed Meridian Airport Authority's complaint logs. They subpoenaed Holly Whitaker's personnel file. What they found made the video look like the tip of the iceberg. Holly Whitaker had 11 prior complaints filed against her. 11. Over 6 years. 9 of those complaints came from passengers of color. A Pakistani-American cardiologist who was told his medical conference credentials looked forged. A Honduran grandmother who was denied boarding because Holly said her green card didn't look right. It was valid. A black businessman who was pulled aside and searched after Holly claimed he matched a description that, once again, did not exist. 11 complaints, 9 involving people of color. Every single one had been received by Greg Sutton. Every single one had been marked resolved, no action required. Every single one had been buried in a filing cabinet in the back office of Gate B-22, like it never happened. Greg Sutton hadn't just looked the other way. He had built a system for looking the other way. A paper trail of silence that protected Holly Whitaker for 6 years while she used her counter as a throne and her boarding scanner as a weapon. The federal administrative hearing was convened 5 weeks later, Judge Theodore Whitfield presiding. A wood-paneled room in the federal courthouse in Charlotte. No cameras allowed inside, but a crowd of reporters filled the hallway. Aubrey Carlisle sat in the 3rd row. Officer Caleb Brennan sat behind her in his dress uniform. Aubrey testified first. She described what she saw. She played the video. The courtroom was silent for 7 minutes and 32 seconds. Officer Brennan testified next. He confirmed that he had personally cleared Danny through TSA security, that her ID was valid, that he had intervened at the gate and been told by Holly to stay in your lane. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the arms of the witness chair hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Then 3 of the 11 previous complainants testified. They had flown in on their own money. The Pakistani-American cardiologist, the Honduran grandmother speaking through a translator, a black college professor from Virginia who had been denied boarding 3 years ago and told by Greg Sutton that these things happen when she tried to file a formal complaint. Their stories were different in detail, but identical in structure. The same gate, the same agent, the same fake justification, the same supervisor shrugging it off. Danny testified last. She sat in the witness chair wearing the same navy blazer. She spoke for 14 minutes without raising her voice once. She described the interaction from beginning to end. She named every document Holly threw away, one by one. The boarding pass, the school ID, the debit card, the Georgia Tech confirmation letter. And then she named the last item. My father's military funeral program. Staff Sergeant William Tucker, United States Air Force. He died when I was 9. She paused. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming through the ceiling vents. Miss Whitaker threw it in the trash and called it a prop. Judge Whitfield removed his glasses and set them on the bench. He didn't speak for a long time. The ruling came 3 days later. Meridian Airport Authority's operating certificate was suspended for 90 days, with full revocation pending corrective action. The airport could not process a single commercial flight until it met every condition the FAA imposed. Crestline Airways was fined $312 million, one of the largest civil rights penalties in aviation history. Holly Whitaker was permanently barred from any FAA-licensed facility in the United States. Not suspended, not transferred. Banned for life. Greg Sutton was referred for federal prosecution for falsifying complaint records and obstruction of a civil rights investigation. He faced up to 5 years. Walter Ashby, CEO of Meridian Airport Authority, resigned within a week. His resignation letter was one sentence. I accept responsibility for the failures that occurred under my leadership. The airport reopened after 91 days. Every employee, from gate agents to baggage handlers to executive staff, was required to complete federally monitored civil rights training. A new independent complaint system was installed, reporting directly to the FAA, bypassing airport management entirely. Federal oversight would continue for 3 years. And then something larger happened. Congress held hearings. The footage played on the Senate floor. A bipartisan bill was introduced, informally named the Tucker Rule, requiring every airline gate agent in the United States to complete annual implicit bias training and mandating that all passenger complaints be logged in an independent federal database within 24 hours. The bill passed both chambers in 8 months. 1 year later, Danielle Tucker walked across a stage at Georgia Tech wearing a white lab coat over her freshman orientation shirt. She had been invited to give a TED Talk, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as an aerospace engineering student with a story worth telling. The title of her talk was What My Father's Funeral Program Taught Me About Standing Still. The auditorium held 800 people. Every seat was full. In the front row, Eleanor Tucker sat with her glasses on the chain around her neck and her hands folded in her lap. She did not clap when Danny walked out. She just nodded once. The nod of a woman who had spent 31 years on the bench and knew that the strongest statement is the one you don't have to make. In the back row, standing against the wall in plain clothes, Margaret Holloway watched her niece take the podium. She had flown in from Atlanta that morning. She didn't tell anyone she was coming. Danny spoke for 18 minutes. She talked about composure, about what it means to stand still when someone is trying to make you disappear. about the difference between silence that comes from fear and silence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. She never mentioned Holly Whitaker by name. She didn't have to. Now, let me tell you what happened to everyone else. Holly Whitaker tried to sue Crestline Airways for wrongful termination. She claimed she had been following standard security procedures and was fired without due process. The case was dismissed in 4 months. The judge cited Aubrey's video, the FAA's findings, and the 11 buried complaints as evidence of a sustained pattern of discriminatory conduct that the defendant was not only aware of, but actively chose to continue. Holly then filed a defamation lawsuit against Aubrey Carlisle, claiming the video was edited to make her look bad. Aubrey's attorney submitted the raw, unedited footage in discovery. It was 7 minutes and 32 seconds long. The edited version Aubrey posted was also 7 minutes and 32 seconds long. The case was dismissed with prejudice. Holly is now working a non-customer-facing job at a warehouse distribution center 2 states away. She gave one interview to a small podcast with fewer than 1,000 listeners. She said she was just doing her job and that the whole thing got blown out of proportion. She said she wasn't racist. She said she would do the same thing again. Some people, the lesson never lands. But the system around them changed anyway. And that's the win. Officer Caleb Brennan was promoted. He now leads a passenger rights training program for new TSA officers at Charlotte Douglas. The first slide in his training deck is a still frame from Aubrey's video, the moment he stepped in at gate B22 and told Holly that Danny's ID was valid. He titled that slide, "This is the bare minimum." Every new officer sees it on their first day. Every new officer is told the same thing Brennan tells them. Your badge is not a wall. It's a door. Make sure you're opening it for the right reasons. Aubrey Carlisle quit her graphic design job 3 months after the incident. She founded a nonprofit called GateCheck that helps airline passengers document and report civil rights violations at airports across the country. The organization provides free legal referrals, helps passengers file federal complaints, and maintains a public database of incidents that would otherwise disappear into filing cabinets, like Holly's 11 complaints did. Eleanor Tucker sits on the board. And Danny? Danny finished her freshman year with a 3.9 GPA. She joined the university's rocketry club. She mentors 2 high school girls from Atlanta through a STEM outreach program. She still flies through Charlotte Douglas sometimes, and every time she walks past gate B22, she doesn't slow down. She doesn't look. She just keeps walking. Because that gate doesn't define her. It never did. Holly Whitaker thought she was looking at a kid she could push around, someone with no power and no voice, and no one standing behind her. She was looking at 3 generations of women who had spent their entire lives building the exact tools needed to dismantle what Holly was doing. A judge, a federal administrator, and a 17-year-old girl who had the composure to use them both at exactly the right moment. The thing about quiet strength is this. By the time you realize it was standing in front of you, it is already won. Hit like if you believe this story should be playing in every gate agent training room in America. Subscribe, because next week I have a story about a janitor who brought down a senator. And share this one, because somewhere right now, someone is standing at a counter being told they don't belong, and they need to know that standing still is not the same as standing down. Composure is a weapon. Use it well. But for 3 generations of strong women built the tools so one girl could stand still and win. That's legacy right there. Raise your kids ready. Protect them with knowledge, not just love. That combo? Unstoppable.
Bye.